Hello, my name's Allie. 3 weeks ago, my sister fractured my skull because I wouldn't give her money for her Botox appointment. And my mother, the woman who raised me, stood over my hospital bed and said one word. Good. That wasn't the first time they hurt me. It was just the first time I documented everything. The bruises, the bank theft, the fake signatures. They said I was dramatic, that I imagined it all. So why did they forge my name to steal my home? Why did they take out a loan in my name? Why did they leave me with nothing and still call it love? Is that what family looks like? Or is it just abuse, wrapped in obligation and silence? And when I finally fought back, when I took them to court, what do you think happened next? The hallway was darker than usual when I stepped out of my car that night. The porch light flickered as I climbed the steps, shifting the grocery bag against my hip, the paper rustling against my scrubs. I was exhausted, 14 hours on my feet, 2 patients coded, 1 lost. I just wanted a shower, something microwaved, and silence. But Valora was already there. She leaned against the doorframe of my duplex, arms crossed like she owned the place. Her lips were glossy, hair pulled into a too-tight bun. I didn't need to see the smirk forming to know tonight wasn't going to end quietly. "Hey, sis," she drawled. "Got a sec?" My keys stalled halfway into the lock. "Valora, it's late." Her eyes scanned me, unimpressed. "Late for who? I just need 100, that's all. Touch-up appointment tomorrow. Botox. You know how my brand has to stay fresh." I set the groceries down, calmly. "I told you last month, I'm done covering for you. I'm barely managing my own bills." She rolled her eyes so hard it could have spun her into orbit. "God, Allie, you're so tight lately. What happened to family first?" I kept my voice steady. "Family doesn't knock you over every time you say no." That did it. The change in her was instant. Her arms dropped, posture tightened. She stepped forward with that same aggression I'd seen when we were kids, when she pushed me into the bathroom wall for looking at her funny. "You selfish little—" she started, and then her hand was on my collar. It all unraveled fast. She shoved me, hard. My back hit the door. My knees gave way. My bag tumbled to the floor, apples rolling across the doormat. I tried to push her off, but she had my phone in her hand, and before I could speak, the screen cracked across my temple. White-hot pain sliced through my head like broken glass. I heard myself gasp, and then the world dipped sideways. Cold. Floor. Silence. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor shouted. Tires squealed. Then sirens. It felt like I blinked, and everything changed. Hospital ceiling lights burned above me. Beeps. The scent of antiseptic and something warm. Tea. Alma was sitting beside me, my old literature teacher from high school. Her soft curls now grayer, her shoulders still calm, like nothing ever shook her. "Hey, Allie," she whispered, fingers wrapped around a foam coffee cup. "You're safe now." I couldn't move my head. My mouth felt heavy. "Why are you—" She cut me off gently. "I was watching Valora's live. Only for a second. It went black fast. But it was enough." A nurse entered. "Fractured skull, mild concussion. You were lucky," she said, like luck had anything to do with it. I turned to Alma. "Did my mom?" She shook her head. "Not yet. I called her." 3 hours passed before Damaris showed. She didn't rush in. No trembling hands, no swollen eyes. Just strolled in like she was coming to check on a neighbor. Her purse matched her shoes, her hair was set, not a strand out of place. I sat up slowly, pain needling through my spine. "Hi, Mom," she sighed. "I just don't understand what you did to make her that angry." My throat dried instantly. "Excuse me?" Damaris clutched her bag tighter. "You know Valora's temper. If you hadn't provoked her—" "Provoked her?" I repeated. "She fractured my skull." She shrugged. "Still, it's not like you're innocent, always pushing her buttons." "Mom," I said carefully, trying to hold my voice steady. "She hit me. In the head. With my own phone." She nodded, unbothered. "Good." Silence. No wind. No breath. Just that word, dropped like a stone in water. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. But I felt something in me shift. Something deep and final. That word carried the weight of years. She tapped her bag and glanced at the clock. I have to get to the store before it closes. Do you need anything? Milk? I said nothing, and she left. Later that night, the monitors around me beeped softly in the dark, each sound marking time I'd never get back. I laid there, staring at a crack in the ceiling tile, thinking of every time I kept quiet so Valora wouldn't lash out, every time I let Mom excuse her behavior, every dollar loaned, every bruise ignored, every apology I gave for things I didn't break. The door clicked. A nurse adjusted the drip and whispered, "Try to rest." I nodded, eyes still fixed above. This wasn't the first time, but it'd be the last. The officer's badge caught the morning light as he stepped into my hospital room. I hadn't noticed the sun until that moment, how it filtered in through the blinds, striping the beige walls like prison bars. I shifted in the bed, a dull ache humming at the base of my skull. The nurse beside him looked uncomfortable, like she'd walked in on something sacred and wasn't sure how to retreat. "Ms. Goodwin," he said, voice professional but softened at the edges. "Your sister's statement says you attacked her first. She claims self-defense." For a brief moment, I felt heat surge in my chest, not from anger, but disbelief. It was so Valora, always flipping the script, always the victim. I sat up slowly, head pounding. "I'd like to make a formal statement." He nodded and pulled out a small recorder from his breast pocket. The nurse excused herself, and the door shut behind her with a click that sounded too final. I told him everything, what happened that night, her demand for money, the blow to my head. My voice didn't tremble, not because I wasn't scared, but because I'd spent most of my life practicing calm in chaos. He thanked me, said someone would follow up, and left, just as quietly. When the door closed again, I was alone with the sound of machines beeping, keeping rhythm with thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. I reached for the small notepad the hospital left by the bedside. Alma had written a note before leaving. "Call me when you're ready. A." I folded it once, tucked it in my palm, and stared out the window. The sky was clear, too blue for a day like this. I don't know what pulled me under, but my eyes drifted shut. And suddenly, I was 12 again. It was my birthday, technically, but no one mentioned it. Valora had an appointment that morning, some last-minute hair thing she couldn't miss. Damaris handed me a towel after breakfast. "Dry those dishes, that's your job." No cake, no gift. I remember opening the fridge, hoping to find even a slice of something sweet. Instead, there was a leftover muffin from the week before. I snuck it to my room, lit the end of a broken birthday candle I'd found in a drawer, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Allie," to the silence. Flash forward 2 years, 14, and finally bold enough to question her. I caught Valora digging through my backpack. I had saved up $42 from babysitting for a neighbor, planning to buy my first decent pair of shoes that weren't hand-me-downs. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. "Looking for gum." I stepped closer, saw the cash tucked in her fist. "That's my money, Valora," she smirked. "And?" When I didn't back down, she shoved me. My heel caught the edge of the stair, and I tumbled down half a flight. I cried out, loud enough that Damaris came running, but all she did was look at me, soaked in tears, elbow scraped raw, and say, "Stop being dramatic. You're always so sensitive." At 17, it happened again. Valora slapped me across the face during a holiday dinner because I accidentally spilled cranberry sauce on her dress. The guests froze. Someone laughed nervously. Damaris pulled me aside afterward and hissed, "You embarrassed the family. Apologize." I did, like I always did. Back in the hospital room, the weight of those moments pressed against my chest like wet cement. My fingers absent-mindedly grazed the bandage on my forehead, and I whispered to no one. I should have left a long time ago, but I hadn't. I stayed, believing blood meant something, that if I just gave more, tolerated more, maybe eventually I'd be seen. I didn't notice the nurse return until she cleared her throat. "Sorry," she said, holding a clipboard. "I didn't want to interrupt." "It's fine." She glanced down, then looked up again, hesitating. "There's someone here from billing. They have some questions about your insurance policy." I furrowed my brow. My insurance? She nodded. They're in the hallway. Want me to send them in? I nodded slowly, already feeling the shift in air. Something was coming. I could sense it, and it wouldn't be kind. As the billing rep entered, clipboard in hand, and began speaking in that measured tone reserved for bad news, I realized something had changed behind the scenes. Papers shifted, names crossed, decisions made without me. She said something about my status changing, about authorization being declined, that my emergency contact had adjusted my dependent status. Words floated around like static: pending coverage, authorization denial, policy reassignment. I blinked hard. Who's listed as my emergency contact? She scanned the paper. Damaris Goodwin. Of course. I leaned back against the pillow, not out of weakness but calculation. Things weren't just unfair, they were manipulated. The woman left, offering a card to call the provider directly. I placed it on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling again, but not like before. Now, I wasn't a child lighting candles in the dark. I wasn't the girl apologizing for someone else's violence. I was the woman they underestimated. And that was their mistake. I spent one more night in the hospital. They said they wanted to monitor the swelling, but I think it was really about liability. Either way, I didn't argue. I wasn't in a rush to return to a place that had become foreign while I was gone. Alma came the next morning. She brought my coat, my keys, and a small bag of essentials she somehow knew I'd forgotten. She didn't speak much, just drove, hands at 10 and 2, eyes locked ahead. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence only two women who've carried too much for too long can share without explanation. When she pulled up outside my apartment, I hesitated. It looked smaller than I remembered, even though nothing had changed. The same blue siding, the cracked step on the porch. But now it all felt too tight, like the walls had pulled closer while I was gone. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was in its place, yet something was off. My couch, my lamp, my framed print of that Oregon coastline, it all sat untouched, and yet the air felt heavier. Alma stayed just long enough to make sure I could get up the stairs, then squeezed my hand and left. "Call me," she said, then paused. "Only if you want to. No pressure." I nodded. "Thank you." The door closed behind her, and the weight of being alone settled over me like a second skin. I needed to do something, anything, to keep from thinking too long. So I unpacked the bag Alma had brought, put the kettle on, and sat at my kitchen table. That's when I noticed the mail, stacked on the counter, untouched from before the hospital. I started sifting through it out of habit, barely noticing the familiar logos and envelopes. But one caught my eye: bank statement. I opened it, half expecting the usual. Instead, what I saw made my stomach twist. 3 automatic withdrawals, same amount, same destination. I pulled up my banking app, hands slightly trembling now. Over $8,000 gone in 3 months. The transactions all tied to something labeled Velora Revive. I tapped on the merchant info. It listed a salon downtown. I'd never heard of it. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered, pushing the chair back as I stood. I didn't remember agreeing to anything like this. There hadn't been any conversations, no emails, no phone calls. Nothing. I sat back down, trying to calm my thoughts. The words blurred on the screen. I pulled out the folder I had labeled 2018-2023 bank records. Maybe part of me had already known I'd need this someday. Maybe I'd been preparing for this fight long before my skull ever hit the floor. One by one, I printed out the transactions, highlighting each. They painted a clear picture. Someone had access to my finances, and they weren't being subtle. After an hour of printing, organizing, and breathing through the fury rising in my chest, I called the hospital's billing department. A woman named Karen answered. Her tone was warm, neutral, until she looked up my account. She said. "Looks like your insurance policy was changed about 3 weeks ago." "Changed?" I repeated. "Yes, it shows you're listed under dependent status now. Coverage is active but limited, based on household income of the primary holder, Damaris Goodwin." I almost dropped the phone. "I didn't authorize that. I said slowly, trying not to raise my voice. I'm 33. I haven't been a dependent in over a decade. I understand, Karen said, sounding slightly more alert now. You may want to contact your provider directly to file a dispute. I can email you the form. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for a full minute. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Someone had gone into my profile and made legal changes to bind me back to a woman who thought my pain was good. I needed to know why. Not in theory, not in guesses. I needed to hear it. I picked up my phone and called Damaris. She answered on the second ring. Allie, I was wondering when you'd call. I didn't bother with small talk. Why did you change my insurance? Why is my money going to Valora Revive? A pause. Then, in that tone she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable while doing something entirely unreasonable, she replied, I had to streamline things. Your sister's trying to start something. She needed stability. You've always managed. I let the silence stretch. So what, you rerouted my finances to fund her spa? Downgraded my coverage without asking? You're overreacting, she said, sharper now. You're lucky to have a family at all. We take care of each other. I almost laughed. Do we? I said. Because it feels a lot like you take and I just disappear. You're being dramatic, Allie. I was in the hospital. I visited. You said I provoked her. You said good. Silence. Not denial. Just silence. I inhaled slowly. You didn't just stop being my mother when you said that. You stopped being my emergency contact. You stopped having any say in my life. You're being cruel, she said quietly. No, I replied. I'm being awake. I hung up. Not out of anger, but clarity. Back at the kitchen table, I opened the bank folder again and pulled out a fresh sheet. On the top, I wrote in block letters, Fraud. Timeline of transfers, 2019 to present. I stapled the first batch of printouts and whispered, Let's see how long you've been lucky, Mom. The woman on the other end of the line didn't flinch when I said the words. Her tone didn't change either. Understood, ma'am. We'll begin the paperwork for the fraud investigation. We'll need a formal statement and any documentation you have. I had plenty. I hung up, stood in my kitchen a beat too long, and then moved like a machine. I gathered the printed statements, screenshots, the credit report, each paper a wound that hadn't scabbed over. The folder was getting heavy, not just in weight, but in what it meant. It wasn't just numbers anymore. It was evidence of years where silence was easier than confrontation. By late afternoon, I was heating up leftover rice in the microwave, the hum of the machine filling the kitchen. I hadn't eaten all day, not because I wasn't hungry, but because I hadn't felt human. Now, my body was reminding me I had to stay functional. As I stirred the rice and soy sauce into a chipped ceramic bowl, my phone vibrated on the counter. A notification from Instagram popped up. Valora was live. I shouldn't have opened it. I should have blocked her days ago. But something made me tap. The screen filled with her face, glowing under soft spa lighting, a white mask spread across her cheeks, head wrapped in a pink towel. She looked serene and smug. Self-care isn't selfish, she said, looking into the camera. It's survival. I believe in investing in yourself, and I'm lucky to have angels around me who don't even know they're helping. I stared, rice forgotten. The comments rolled in, heart emojis, praise, people begging to know what facial products she used. She smiled wider. My thumb hovered over the screen. I closed the app without another word. I ate in silence, the only sounds my chewing and the occasional groan of the heater trying to keep up with Oregon's unpredictable autumn chill. An hour later, I changed into jeans and a thick cardigan, tied my hair back, and drove across town to the salon, Valora Revive. It was in a renovated corner unit near the Arts District. Everything about the place screamed curated luxury. Gold-trimmed signage, black and white floor tiles, lush fiddle-leaf fig trees by the windows. It smelled like lemongrass and entitlement. I walked in and was greeted by a receptionist who looked like she stepped out of a commercial. Bright smile, perfect teeth. Welcome to Valora Revive. Do you have an appointment? I kept my expression neutral. No, I'm new in town. Just wanted to learn more. Thinking of gifting a friend a treatment. She beamed. That's lovely. We have amazing packages. Our owner's so inspiring. She opened this place just this year with help from, well, a very generous backer, Allie G. My breath caught. I recovered quickly. That's a beautiful name, she nodded. Isn't it? We call her our angel investor. I thanked her and left before my face betrayed me. As I stepped back into the crisp air, I stood on the curb for a moment, feeling my legs go stiff. I couldn't decide if I was angry or just tired. At home, I sat at my desk and opened my credit monitoring account. I requested a full report. It took 30 minutes to arrive, in big, bold letters. A $50,000 loan opened in January, co-signed by my emergency contact, Damaris Goodwin. Loan purpose, business startup. I scrolled through the pages, numb. Monthly payments were being auto-deducted from a secondary checking account I rarely used, one Valora had access to, just in case. There it was, in ink. My name tied to a business I didn't know existed until today. And my mother's signature right beside mine, forged just enough to pass if you weren't looking closely. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. That would have been easier. Instead, I picked up my keys. The drive to Damaris's house was less than 10 minutes, but I used every second of it to rehearse what I wanted to say. But when I arrived, nothing came out the way I planned. The door was open. Music played inside, some soft jazz station she always had on. I knocked, stepped in. Valora was sprawled across the sofa, glass of wine in hand, silk robe cinched tight. Look who decided to show up, she said without moving. Damaris appeared from the kitchen, holding a bowl of cherries. Allie, we weren't expecting company. I held up the folder. Funny, because I wasn't expecting to find my name on a loan application for a spa I've never stepped foot in. Valora chuckled. You're so dramatic. Don't, I snapped. Don't say that word again. Not to me. Damaris sighed like I was exhausting her. We didn't think you'd mind. You never say no. I looked at her, really looked at her. The way she held her chin up, the dismissive tilt of her head. The way Valora smiled in the background, smug and self-satisfied, sipping from a glass she probably didn't buy. You're right, I said finally. I never say no. They both relaxed a little. That's the thing about people who manipulate. They expect your patterns to stay loyal. But that stops today, I continued, my voice cutting clean through the air. You forged my signature. You took out debt in my name. You funneled money through accounts I trusted you with. That's not family. That's fraud. Damaris's face paled, but she recovered fast. Sweetheart, don't make this bigger than it is. You already did. I turned and walked out before she could throw another excuse at me. In my car, with the windows rolled up, I pulled out my phone, found the number for my bank's fraud line, and hit call. When the agent picked up, I didn't hesitate. Hi, I'd like to begin a fraud claim. Yes, against a family member. Valora's voice was still in my ears when I stepped back into my apartment. Let's play, she'd said. I didn't need to ask what that meant. With her, everything was a game. One where she always played the victim when she lost, and the queen when she won. But I wasn't playing anymore. I placed the letter copies down on the kitchen counter. The originals were already with the notary, with stamped proof of filing, copies sent to both the bank and my lawyer. It had taken 3 hours that morning to notarize everything, but I did it without flinching. For the first time, I wasn't hesitating. I was acting. Still, the weight of what I had started sat heavy on my shoulders. It's one thing to file paperwork. It's another to challenge the people who've made you question your own worth for decades. I brewed tea, not because I wanted it, but because I needed the motion, the heat, the grounding. Outside, the sun dipped toward late afternoon, casting amber streaks through the blinds. I opened my phone, half out of habit, half to distract myself. A familiar red notification was at the top. Valora was live again. I paused. I should have ignored it, but I tapped anyway. There she was, full glam, wine glass in hand, seated in what looked like my old living room chair. The one she'd insisted clashed with her aesthetic 2 years ago. I guess it grew on her. People ask me all the time how I got where I am, she said, tossing her curls. And I tell them hard work, hustle, and cutting off dead weight. A laugh. From her. Then she lifted her glass. Some folks spend their whole lives being bitter because they didn't know how to use what they had. I used what I had, even if it came with strings, even if it came with a dumb sister who never said no. The comments poured in like confetti, laughing emojis, preach queen, tell 'em sis. She grinned at the camera. Everything I have, I earned. Well, minus the dumb sister's help. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I just pressed the screen until the live ended, then placed the phone face down on the counter. My hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. That surprised me. Instead, I felt something colder, calmer, like a steel door had clicked shut behind my ribs. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a declaration. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She thought she'd win again. I left the tea untouched and grabbed my bag. There was one more piece I needed to check before moving forward, one more thread she might have pulled without me noticing. 20 minutes later, I was walking into the county property records office, a squat beige building 2 blocks from City Hall. The receptionist behind the window greeted me with the usual transactional cheer. "I need to check the title on a property," I said. "Address?" she asked. I gave it, my condo, my home. She typed for a moment, then paused. "Do you have ID?" I handed it over. Her eyes scanned it, then flicked to the screen again. "I'm sorry," she said, tone shifting. "The title was transferred 3 months ago." My breath caught. Transferred to who? Valora Goodwin. There was a long pause. I didn't blink. "Do you have the paperwork on file?" She nodded, printing a sheet. I stared at the black and white document, my signature scribbled at the bottom, except it wasn't mine. Close, but not exact. A forgery. I took the printout and walked back to my car. My steps were steady, but inside me, something fractured again. Valora hadn't just stolen from me. She'd erased me. By early evening, I was standing outside Damaris's house again. The porch light was on, the same floral wreath on the door from last spring still hanging. I rang once. Valora opened the door, wineglass still in hand. "Did you bring a peace offering?" she asked. I didn't respond. I walked in. Damaris sat in the living room, flipping through a catalog like this was just any other day. "You changed the title on my condo," I said, holding up the printout. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Valora needed a stable place." "You mean she needed my life?" Valora laughed behind me. "You're just mad because I know how to use what's given to me." I turned to her. "Next time you use me, Valora, read the terms." She raised her eyebrows. "Is that supposed to scare me?" I turned back to Damaris. "I've filed. It's done. Fraud, theft. And you, co-signer and emergency contact, are liable. You signed the loan papers. You redirected my insurance. And now this." She stood up, finally. "Allie, we're family." "No," I said quietly. "You just share my blood." I left without waiting for more excuses. Back at home, I placed the second set of documents, property theft, into the file. Then I sealed the envelope, addressed it to the district attorney's office, and dropped it in the mailbox before the last pickup. It was dark when I returned, headlights passing as I stepped back inside. I felt it before I saw it. Valora had received her copy. Because 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a photo of her holding the documents in one hand and a single line of text. "So she wants to play hard? Let's play." I locked the screen. Let her play. I had already started building the rules. It was barely 9 a.m. when the voicemail came through. I was still in my robe, sipping black coffee at the kitchen table, going over my list of documentation for the attorney. I hadn't planned to check my phone until later, but the screen flashed with Damaris's name, followed by a short message. I listened to it only once. "You've always been a disappointment, Allie. Don't call here again." That was it. No explanation, no hesitation, just a sentence wrapped in glass and left on my doorstep to step on barefoot. I didn't cry. The version of me that would have crumbled under that kind of dismissal no longer lived here. What I felt instead was something much sharper, a sense of cold confirmation. She'd chosen Valora. Again. But this time, she didn't even pretend to hide it behind moral platitudes. I put the phone down and moved back to my papers. My fingers worked automatically, sorting through account summaries, utility bills, flagged charges, all the fragments of my identity that had been stripped without permission. I added the voicemail transcript to the binder. Mid-morning sunlight came through the blinds, painting soft lines across the countertop. I stared at them, blinking. I had once believed light made everything clearer, but clarity didn't always bring comfort. Sometimes, it simply made the shape of betrayal easier to trace. By early afternoon, Alma showed up, unannounced but not uninvited. She came with that slow, deliberate calm she always carried, like a woman who knew exactly what silence could teach when used properly. "I brought tea," she said, holding up a small thermos. "Didn't know if you'd eaten." I hadn't, but I didn't say that. We sat in my living room, not speaking for several minutes. Just the two of us, legs crossed, hands wrapped around warm cups. She didn't ask me to talk. She never did. Eventually, I nodded toward the pile of evidence on the coffee table. I kept everything. Every voicemail. Every time she borrowed my card. Every fake apology. I think part of me always knew I'd need proof. Alma tilted her head. And now? I took a slow breath. Now I use it. I pulled out an old phone from the kitchen drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years but had never thrown out. I charged it earlier that morning, anticipating this moment. Alma leaned in as I scrolled through the old voicemail box, each entry like a tiny thorn under the skin. Then I reached one I hadn't heard in a long time, dated July 2020. I pressed play. Damaris's voice crackled first. "She's too soft to fight us. As long as she pays, we're safe." Then Valora's reply. "If she resists, I'll hurt her." Again. The recording ended. The silence afterward was heavier than the words. Alma didn't blink. "You have more?" I nodded, my voice even. "I have photos. Of bruises. Of checks I didn't sign. And now this." We stared at the phone for a while before I said it. "Time to fight louder." Alma squeezed my hand once, gently. "You're ready?" Later that afternoon, I called the attorney Alma had recommended months ago. His assistant answered, then transferred me. When he picked up, his voice was warm, but clipped, efficient. "Miss Goodwin, I've reviewed the documents you sent yesterday. I believe we have a very strong case." "I'm ready to file everything," I told him. "Good. We'll begin with the property and financial fraud, then add medical assault and emotional abuse once we get the police transcripts." I added the audio file and medical photos to the shared drive he'd created. When it finished uploading, I stared at the screen. "This isn't revenge," I said. "I never assumed it was," he replied. "It's restitution." After the call, I walked out to the mailbox and found a padded envelope waiting. No return address. Inside was an old photo, me, maybe 10 years old, standing next to my dad on the back porch. He had one hand on my shoulder, and I was mid-laugh, squinting into the sun. Tucked behind the photo was a note in Alma's handwriting. "He always said you were the brave one." That evening, I opened my email. Dozens of unread messages had piled up while I was focused on legal filings. One stood out, subject line, "Summons issued." I clicked. Attached were PDFs, formal charges of fraud, theft, battery. Valora was officially being served. Somewhere across town, I imagined her opening the same email, her manicured hand hovering above the mouse, her stomach turning. She recorded us. That's what she'd say, I was sure. As if the act of telling the truth was more offensive than what they did in the first place. But I wasn't worried about her reaction, because for once, my voice wasn't a whisper, it was a record. The buzz from my phone came at 7:42 a.m., sharp and jarring. I had just zipped up the side of my slacks, steadying myself in the bathroom mirror. My reflection stared back at me, hair pinned, blouse crisp, no trace of the woman who'd once apologized to the same people she was about to face. The message was from Alma. "Parking is a nightmare. I grabbed us a bench inside." Of course she did. By 8:15, I was walking through the sliding doors of the Marion County Courthouse. My palms weren't sweating, but I could feel a pulse in them. The folder I carried was light but full of weight. Copies of the loan documents, title transfer, printouts of Valora's livestream captions, the hospital report, my statements. All filed, all real, all enough. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Alma sat upright on a bench, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded. She looked like a schoolteacher again, like she had a quiz up her sleeve. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Numb. Focused. "You look ready." I didn't answer. Just held the folder to my chest and took a breath as the bailiff opened the courtroom door. Inside, the gallery was sparsely filled. 2 strangers, 1 court clerk, a judge with readers pushed halfway down her nose, and then Valora and Damaris. Valora wore head-to-toe white like she was auditioning for forgiveness. Damaris wore navy blue, her lips painted dark, hair pulled into a bun that screamed control. Neither looked at me as I entered. We took our seats. Alma on my right, my attorney Mr. Keeley to my left. When the judge called the session to order, the silence was surgical. Valora leaned toward Damaris and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "This? This is her revenge tour?" I didn't flinch. The judge cleared her throat. "This hearing concerns civil complaints filed by Ms. Allie Goodwin, alleging financial fraud, medical negligence, identity theft, and property misappropriation against Mrs. Valora Goodwin and Mrs. Damaris Goodwin." Valora leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Damaris stayed stone still. Mr. Keeley stood first. He was concise, no theatrics, just the facts. As he laid out the sequence of events, I watched the judge. Her pen scratched quietly, but her eyebrows arched when he mentioned the forged title. When he played the voicemail from 2020, everything changed. "She's too soft to fight us. As long as she pays, we're safe. If she resists, I'll hurt her." Again, no one moved. Valora's eyes narrowed, her arms dropping to her lap. Damaris blinked for the first time in 10 minutes. Then came the exhibits. The screenshots of the live streams, Valora's statements about dumb sisters, financial records tied to the salon, property title transfer with my falsified signature. Damaris's lip quivered, just once. Valora turned to the judge and said too loudly, "She knew what she was doing. She let us—" "Miss Goodwin," the judge cut in, firm. "You will remain silent unless asked to speak." The rest of the morning passed in steady, brutal rhythm. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. When the opposing counsel tried to downplay my injuries, he presented the ER photos. When they argued I'd never said no before, he countered, "Silence does not equal consent, particularly when intimidation is involved." By noon, the judge called for a recess. I stepped outside to the bench where Alma had first sat that morning. She passed me a water bottle and said nothing. At 1:30, we reconvened for the ruling. Everyone stood. The judge remained seated. "In reviewing the evidence submitted, this court finds in favor of Ms. Allie Goodwin," she began. I didn't breathe. "Ms. Valora Goodwin is hereby ordered to pay restitution totaling $83,400 in damages, inclusive of financial loss, unauthorized use of personal accounts, and emotional distress. Property title to 218 East Overlook Drive shall be returned to Ms. Allie Goodwin within 14 business days. A 3-year restraining order is granted against both defendants, effective immediately." She turned her gaze to Damaris. "Miss Damaris Goodwin, your role in co-signing fraudulent financial instruments, manipulating insurance coverage, and transferring property without lawful authority has resulted in your removal as next of kin on all medical and legal documents pertaining to the plaintiff. Furthermore, you are hereby ordered to vacate 218 East Overlook Drive within 10 business days." I exhaled. Not relief. Something quieter, more solid. The judge closed with, "This court hopes all parties will use this ruling as an opportunity to redefine boundaries with integrity. Session is adjourned." The gavel cracked once, sharp and final. We filed out into the afternoon sun. Cameras had gathered outside, local reporters whispering as Valora emerged. She kept her head high until one of them asked, "Any comment on today's ruling?" Valora paused, pulled off her sunglasses, tossed them toward the camera. "This isn't over," she shouted. I walked past her, calm, steady. "Yes, it is." And then I kept walking. The courthouse faded in my rearview mirror as I drove through town. The streets were quiet, the light that peculiar shade of late autumn gold, too warm for the cold it carried. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The war was over, and the battlefield was behind me. Back at my apartment, I stepped inside and locked the door behind me out of habit, even though for the first time in months, maybe years, it felt unnecessary. There was a stillness in the air that didn't feel suffocating. It felt earned. I slipped off my shoes and walked straight to the kitchen. The leftover takeout from the night before was still in the fridge. I microwaved it without ceremony, spooned it onto a plate, and sat at the table. That's when I noticed the package. It had been pushed through the mail slot and sat awkwardly against the baseboard like it hadn't quite made it to where it was supposed to be. A small padded envelope, handwriting I hadn't seen in years, but immediately recognized. Dad. I hadn't seen his handwriting since before he passed. He died when I was 11, a sudden heart attack in his sleep. No warning, no goodbye. It wrecked what little peace the household had. And Damaris, in her way, took that loss and forged it into a reason for every terrible thing she and Valora did next. But now here it was. His script. Familiar, uneven, full of life. Hands trembling for the first time in days, I opened the package. Inside, a faded photo slid out. Me, maybe 6 years old, sitting on Dad's shoulders in our backyard. My face was all teeth, eyes closed mid-laugh, his hands strong and steady around my legs. Behind us, the fence leaned slightly to one side, the same fence Damaris refused to fix for years afterward. Underneath the photo was a folded birthday card, the kind you'd find in a drugstore, cartoon bear with a party hat. Inside, in his unmistakable scrawl, "You don't owe anyone your light. You just need to keep it burning." No date, no signature. Just that. Tears came, not because I was sad, but because I finally understood the difference between being loved and being managed. He had seen it then. Maybe not the whole future, but enough to leave a message behind. A torch in case everything else went dark. At the bottom of the envelope, tucked beneath the cardboard liner, was a small thumb drive. I stared at it for a moment before walking it over to my laptop. The folder opened quickly, no password, just a series of MP4 files labeled by month and year, nanny cam footage, from the old house. I hadn't even realized one had been installed. Maybe Dad had done it during one of his fix-it weekends. Maybe Alma had copied the files later. Either way, someone had kept them. The first clip was dated April 2009. I clicked. The camera angle was from the living room bookshelf, angled toward the front hallway. There I was, 12 years old, clutching a gift bag, face lit with excitement. I turned toward the staircase. Valora snatched the bag from my hands. I flinched. She opened it, rifled through, then dumped the contents on the floor. Damaris appeared a second later, frowning at the mess, but said nothing to Valora. Instead, she waved at me to clean it up. Next clip. December 2010. Christmas morning. I handed Damaris a card. She didn't open it, just placed it on the counter without looking. Valora received a pair of earrings and screamed with joy. I clapped for her. The next clip hurt most. Summer 2011. A heated exchange. Valora shoved me into the wall. My head hit the frame of the hallway door. I cried. Damaris stepped between us, not to help me, but to scold me. "She has a temper, Allie. You know that. Why do you provoke her?" Watching it now, the truth wasn't subtle. It was loud, obvious, documented. I sat back, breath caught in my chest. So many years I spent wondering if I was imagining things, if I was too sensitive, if I remembered it wrong. But there it was, pixelated proof. The front door opened slowly. I turned. Alma stepped inside. She carried 2 mugs and a small cloth bag. "I figured you hadn't eaten much," she said. "I'm okay," I replied, voice tight. She sat across from me and glanced at the screen. "You found it." I nodded. "I didn't know if you'd be ready," she said, "but I kept them, just in case." I didn't speak for a while. Eventually, I whispered, "I wasn't crazy." "No," she said firmly. "You weren't, but they needed you to believe you were." The next hour passed in a quiet rhythm, sips of tea, occasional glances at the files. At one point, I looked over at Alma and asked, "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" She exhaled, slowly. "Because the cost of stepping into someone else's family is higher than most people think. I thought your mother would change. I thought maybe I had it wrong. And now? I know I didn't. And neither did you." It was dark outside when she left. I walked her to the door, hugged her for the first time in years, and closed it gently behind her. Later, I stood by the window, looking out over the sleepy streets of Salem. Porch lights glowed. A couple walked their dog under yellow street lamps. Someone watered their lawn too late in the season. I held the photo of Dad in my hand and whispered, "I'll keep it burning, Dad. But now, it's only mine to give." The next 3 weeks passed slower than I expected. Not sluggish or stagnant, just unhurried, measured, like time had taken a breath and finally decided to move at a human pace. Not the frantic sprint I'd gotten used to. Not the constant scrambling to fix, to explain, to prove. Just the simple unfolding of days as they were, without demand. I started volunteering at a small domestic abuse support center just outside the city. Alma had mentioned it one afternoon, almost offhandedly, as if she knew I might need it before I did. "Just stop in," she said. "You don't have to do anything big, just be there." So I did. The first few days, I barely spoke. I folded brochures, I wiped down folding tables, I brewed coffee and restocked tissues. I smiled at women who barely made eye contact. Some were older than me, some younger. Most of them looked like they carried their entire lives in their shoulders. Some whispered when they spoke, some didn't speak at all, but they saw me. And when one woman finally leaned over during group one day, eyes tired and searching, and asked, "How did you get free?" I didn't hesitate. I stopped asking permission. It landed. I saw the ripple in her expression, not shock, recognition. Later that afternoon, as I waited for the elevator in the lobby, I caught sight of myself in a wall-length mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize the face looking back. It wasn't exhaustion or trauma I saw. It was something softer, a kind of quiet I hadn't worn in years. A stillness I remembered only faintly, like a childhood memory of riding on my father's shoulders, safe and high above the world. At home, things were still and steady, not hollow, not lonely, just still. My mornings found their own rhythm. A cup of coffee I actually enjoyed. A walk around the block where I didn't flinch at footsteps behind me. Reading a book because I wanted to, not because I needed to analyze it for someone else's approval. The court ruling had brought legal closure, but healing wasn't bound by paperwork. It was unfolding in small ways, every day. Damaris called 5 times that first week. I didn't answer once. Her last voicemail came on a Thursday. I played it on speaker, letting her words echo across the quiet kitchen. "I only wanted to protect your sister." I deleted the message before she could finish her justification. Valora, meanwhile, went dark on social media for about 10 days. Then came the flood. Screenshots, out-of-context clips, commentary from people who had once idolized her. A viral compilation video emerged, one that stitched together the worst parts of her live streams. The smugness, the cruelty, the calculated vulnerability, all of it exposed. Suddenly, people started asking the questions I had asked for years. Where did the money really come from? What happened to her sister? Why is she being served papers? She posted an apology video. Shaky voice, flickering candles, dramatic tears. The internet didn't buy it. Comments poured in. Too late. Convenient timing. Accountability isn't aesthetics. Sponsorships vanished. Brand deals evaporated. By the end of week 3, someone tagged me in a blurry photo online. Valora, at a grocery store. No makeup, no lights, no team. Just her, alone in a hoodie, buying off-brand almond milk. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt removed, detached from her, from the drama, from the part of me that used to need acknowledgement or apology. I didn't need her pain to make mine matter. One night around 9 p.m., I stood in the hallway between the living room and the bedroom, staring at a shelf I'd been avoiding. It was bare, dusty at the edges. I walked over and placed two things on it: a framed photo of Dad, the one that came in the package, and the official court order, side by side, truth and justice. I looked at them for a long while. No tears, no flashbacks, just presence. That same night, I sat down with a notepad and a pen. Not an email, not a text, a letter. I wrote to Alma. I still flinch when the phone rings, I began. I still double-check the locks before bed. And sometimes, I hear their voices in my sleep, but I sleep through the night now. I don't say sorry to the mirror anymore, and when I say no, I mean it. I folded the letter slowly, like a keepsake, sealed it in a plain white envelope, and left it on the entryway table to mail the next morning. 2 days later, I walked to the park across from the old library. The air was crisp with the beginnings of winter. Gray sky, soft wind. Not cold, just quiet. I sat on a bench near the playground. Kids raced each other in puffy coats, their laughter rising like smoke. A mom called out from the sidewalk, "Watch your step!" just as her daughter tripped and stumbled near me. Her shoelace had come undone. I reached down instinctively, steadied her little shoulder, and tied her shoe. Tight and double-knotted. The girl looked up at me, wide-eyed and surprised. Then she smiled, big and bright, a thank you without words. Her mom rushed over, breathless. "Thank you," she said. "She's always running ahead of herself." I smiled, warm and even. "Some of us do that," I replied. "Until we learn how to slow down." She gave me a knowing look. Grateful. Then took her daughter's hand and walked away, boots crunching leaves with every step. I sat there a while longer, watched the trees sway, watched the leaves skitter across the path like tiny dancers unsure where to land. The kind of movement that wasn't desperate, just natural. I didn't think about Valora. I didn't think about Damaris. I didn't think about courtrooms or silence or shame. I thought about the girl, and how we heal when we pass something on that isn't pain, a gesture, a truth. A moment of safety. I thought about scars, how they stop being open wounds once we tend to them, once we carry them with care instead of hiding them away. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to begin. I was living in what had already started. Not every family deserves a seat at your table, especially the ones who confuse loyalty with control and love with leverage. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice after years of being silenced. What would you have done if your own mother said "good" after your sister knocked you unconscious? Tell us in the comments. And if this story hit home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful real-life stories that need to be heard.